75 years ago, when I was 14 years old, I had my first real insight into the subject of today. It was a time of thrashing. At that time, we didn't have combines. We first cut the wheat and with a binder, they called it. And it would gather a group, a bunch like this, put a string around it, and they would throw it out. And then we would go around afterwards and pick up each of those bunches and set them up so that they would dry. Put a cap over them. We would take one of the groups and bend the top so it would sort of get the water off so that everything could dry. And then came the day when we were joined with the neighbors. We'd go to their place and they would come to ours. When they would come to us, they would bring a great thrashing machine, huge things. I'm sure you have seen them. He would back it in with this great big long tube that would take the straw and put it out on a stack. And the fan that blew the straw through that had to go at a certain RPM so that there'd be enough wind to drive it through this long tube and onto the stack. As he had it all set up, he noticed he had one man less to run his rig. So he looked at me and he said, "Carl, would you run the tractor?" It was a big tractor because it took a lot of power to run this thing. And the problem was that if you happen to get some wet straw and it would get into the machine, it would slow the machine down because it would have to work harder to get that straw through. And so my job was to sit there with the control for the flow of energy into the engine. And so you had to listen and you had to be aware when it started going, you had to catch it. Just put a little bit more gasoline. In the car, you have it with your foot, but in a tractor, it's on the steering wheel where you turn the lever and you push a little bit more gas. But then when that wet stuff got through, you had to be there to pull it back a little bit, because if there's too much wind, it draws the wheat that's supposed to be going into a granary, it goes out onto the stack. So it's very important to learn where that energy is. And we get used to it with the car. You start going up a hill, you just put a little more pressure on the accelerator. But you have to learn to do this by hearing on this machine. It was a great time of me becoming aware of something you can't see, but something that is very, very real. The flow of energy, the flow of light, etc. You think you come along pretty well. Go to college, go to seminary, you get out, you join the staff, you join a decree group for supporting the messenger. 2:30 in the morning or 3 o'clock in the morning, you're there decreeing like everything. And suddenly telephone rings. It's Mother. She said, "What are you guys doing?" "Well, we're doing this decree and this decree and this decree." She says, "You're not hitting and it's not happening. Go here and do this and this and this and this." It's always concerned. If that telephone rings at 3:00 in the morning, what is going on? We're not hitting it. Where is it? Why aren't we able to get at it? It's all a matter of learning the flow of the Spirit. And it's very, very difficult for a newcomer. So Gautama wants to deal with this today. And he starts out in a dictation given that's recorded in volume 21, number 28, that was given back in 1978. He talks about this. He said, out of the flame of the Eternal One, I am come to address the evolutions of earth. I am seated in the valley, and around me are gathered thousands upon thousands of devotees at all levels of consciousness and angelic hosts, elementals, servants of the Most High God. From my heart flame, I send light to the earth in answer to the call of those who understand the great quiet, the great quest and question of the age. Seated in the authority of the Lord of the world, I am mindful of the government of the world from inner levels and of the government of the flow of energy to all life. This is the purpose of God government. It is always the government of the flow of energy from God to man. Therefore, the meditator, which is the Christ, is always the governor of life in the individual, and the flow of energy from the great central sun is often tempered by the Christ self, as the soul is not able to absorb and assimilate those great energies that flow. And then again, as by consciousness, individuals increase the capacity to receive that light, the governor, the Christ self, allows a greater degree of energy to fill the chakras and to beam as the light of the heart. You know, this is very important for new people coming in. You don't know what they're talking about. You keep saying the energy is not right. The energy is not right. But you say, well, what are you talking about? I don't feel, I don't understand. It takes time to learn to do this. And working with your Christ self, you allow the energies to fill the chakras. He said, I come then to encourage all souls who see the great drama of unfold in the battle of life, the battle of Armageddon, to set about those necessary corrections of consciousness so as to allow a greater degree of energy to flow from the source into the dense planes of matter where you abide temporarily until you return to the home of light in Shambhala. For then you see, as you have the greater light and the greater contact with the governor, you become imbued with that light of far-off worlds that enables you then to represent vast evolutions among mankind, to represent them before the lords of karma, before the altar of the great central sun, before the council of the royal Teton, and even in our retreat in Shambhala. Now we're talking about millions of people. We're not used to thinking like this way. We are used to thinking about myself, ourselves. Do I feel this? Do I feel that? I don't feel good today. I don't do this. I don't do that. We are so tied up within ourselves that we miss the very basic thing that we have to see if we're going to make our ascension. He said, I have shown to the mother of the world the vast evolutions whom she represents, who have also gathered to hear the word of the Buddha in the valley of the East. The millions of souls who depend on the flow of life from her heart and the hearts of devotees, you and I, who are gathered in salutation of the Buddha and the Christ. You must understand then, as you are one heart, that many life waves receive the nourishment for the sustainment of consciousness by the extraordinary energy that passes through you daily, through your invocations and decrees, a far greater quantity than that which is released by the Christ selves of mankind who have not the science of the spoken word. How do I understand this? You know, probably, that a baby can be born healthy. He can be fed whenever he needs to be fed. He can have his diapers changed, everything's fine, but unless you hold him and you involved him in love and relationship and so on, he will die. It's because he needs your light in order to live. Now, once we understand that, then we can understand what happens around us. So some have so misused the energy of God that not sufficient quantities of energy are released to even sustain their lives. And therefore they live from day to day by the grace of the intercessors, those among embodied mankind in the East and West who draw this extraordinary momentum of energy and therefore nourish life as the water flows to the parched ground. See what we're talking about. It isn't something you can grasp with your hands. It's something you sense in your heart. It's something that attunement, you get up on the wrong side of the bed. If you're sharp and you understand, you stop right then. I used to say with my children, if they come down in the morning, they're grumpy and reacts to everything. I had a paddle hanging on the wall, and I just would say to them, sweetie, you have the choice. You want to go upstairs, cleanse yourself, and they knew how to do that, and put yourself in tune, or do you want me to help you with that thing on the wall? Well, you only had to use it once, and from then on, just pointing to it, and they would choose to go back upstairs, and when they would come down, hi, Daddy, good morning, everything's fine. It's because we must begin to take responsibility for our attunement. And when we get up in the morning, if we feel that is not there, you need to do several things. You can get into a shower. Water will cleanse the body. But at the shower, as you take the shower, you should be tuning yourself into this higher frequency of energy. And you know when you're there by the vibration around the crown chakra. He said, let us see then the great commission of life that is given to the disciples, the Christ and the Buddha. It is the inner experience of the sponsorship of worlds. To this we would draw you, that you might understand that you have become, even unbeknownst to yourselves, those who keep the flame of life on earth in the very real and tangible sense, and therefore you are counted as emissaries of Sanat Kumara. Become aware of what the vibration in the city is. You drive into some of our cities, into the bad areas of the city, and you feel it, you sense it. I remember we came back on staff. I had a car full of people. We had been someplace decreeing and so on, and I drove into this filling station. It was early in the morning, and I had a strong feeling inside, this is not good. And I saw a fellow coming out of the darkness and walking around and watching, looking at our car. And I just said to everybody, close your windows, let's get out of here. And I drove out because that was the setup. Somebody was ready to do some bad things. So as we begin to read the vibration around us, we begin to understand what he's talking about. He says, sometimes you wonder what you are accomplishing as the days pass, and you are challenged by the dark ones who put themselves against your service and your light so that they can cut off that flow of energy and that sustainment of souls throughout the earth. And when there are days that vast segments of light bearers are no longer keeping the flame, or are caught off guard, or are caught into activities of the outer, it happens that some thousands, hear this, some thousands, sometimes more, pass from the screen of life for want of light that must flow daily. So we're caught both ways. If we don't do the work, people die. If we do the work, people live. He said, because you do not see the inner vision of these millions upon millions who want for the release of energy in darkness, then ignorance you sometimes lose the respective of the mission and the vision that is so necessary to the victory. Notice, this is the core of the mission. This is the mission, your mission and mine. He said, when I gave to you the release on non-attachment to the fruit of action, it was that you might have the key whereby you would understand that only legitimate desire is the desire to be the flow of God's light. The only legitimate desire is the flow of God's light. That's our basic mission. He said, and all that interferes with the flow of that light within you, within community, within the disciples of the brotherhood, must be set aside, that light go forth. Light is released in the spoken word, in the printed word, in all that reaches mankind as the teachings of the masters. If we can begin to see this, we can save ourselves so much agony. He says, let your days then be the sealing of the inner flame of obedience to the law of harmony. And let all that goes forth from you be the flow of that God harmony in your service, in your work, and in your sacred labor. That every page that is printed. Let every book that is distributed, let every tape recording that is heard be charged with the initial release of light that flows from the Christ self of each one to the world at large. If we can begin to grasp what we're talking about here, it's like talking about love. But if you've never experienced real love, you don't know what we're talking about. There's no understanding. One of the hardest counselings I've done in the past came from a man he was newly married. And he came and he said, I need to know what love is. He said, I have a most beautiful wife. She loves and so on like this, but I don't know how to tap that to give it back. And he was shedding tears. Well, how do you answer that? Well, just go and love her. Yeah, well, what does it mean? If you were raised in a family, there was no love shared, then you have very little to draw on. This is why we're dealing with this. We need to have this in our conscious awareness so that day by day, we can begin to say, oh, yes, now I get that. Oh, yes, now I get this. Begin to see the teachings of the masters as those stepping stones as we go up the ladder. He said, this desiring to be God must be the governor of the emotional body, the mental body, the etheric, and the physical vehicles of consciousness. And you must have that vision of the Buddha and of Christ to set aside the lesser goals that concern themselves with the defenses of the self and the emotional indulgences of the self, the sympathies and the sentiment. The vision then of the world mother is the vision of her children crying out for the flow of love. You know what they have discovered? They have discovered that people who have diseases, sometimes you pray and pray and pray and pray and pray, nothing happens. But the moment they turn their attention to somebody else and they start really praying for somebody else with the same disease, their disease is healed. It's because we get stuck in ourselves and we only see ourselves sick, or we only see ourselves with the problem. We have to get past this. If we can forget ourselves for a little bit and pray that somebody's cancer will be cured, the cancer we have might just disappear. This is a tremendous insight as we start reaching out to become not just a person, but the person of God through us onto the world. This is the mission. He said it is a universal love that must flow and flow and flow every hour from you. It must be a mighty river of life like the Ganges is to India. So the river of life flowing through the mother and her children is the means of salvation of Terra. Cut off this flow of light, compromise it, and you lose the mission. And the mission has no further purpose, and the dispensation for the mission is withdrawn. Let the light flow then. Let the hearts of the chelas be opened wide. And each day wider as you exercise in the flame, the threefold flame of the heart, to open your heart wider and wider to the coming of the hosts of the Lord. Remember the mission, the mission. It isn't just to become a rich man. It isn't to become building a new home. It isn't become this or that or the other thing on the physical. The mission is to be a channel through which this light can flow. And as it goes through, it's increased and the whole world begins to change, because when you understand your role, that's not just a few people, it's millions of people holding the image, the power for them. It's a matter of really changing one's focus. He said, we have then the situation on earth where those who are closest to the Christ self and to the energy of God are the furthest removed, in many cases, from the positions in government in which they have attained rightfully. For he who is closest to the governor or Christ of the flow of energy is the one who has the right to rule on earth. As we survey the world government this day, we see those who are closest to the dark ones, who govern the flow of dark energies, are the ones who rule in America, in Russia, in China. And the dark ones who have ruled in India have been put down by the voice of the people who were closer even to the village, even in the villages, closer to the heart of God than their leaders. But one teacher of light is not enough. There must be many souls of light who are in the positions of government who can turn the tide of the nations. And this is what we are working at right now in our prayers, in our thought processes, etc. We must change quickly, because if we do not, we lose the Americans. Said the fate of the earth then hangs in the balance of the mission of the Chela, of the Great White Brotherhood, and it is a matter of the governing of the flow of energy. It is that specific area. This energy coming forth from this great central sun will manifest either in the alchemy of transmutation of all that has been done, because sons and daughters of God enter into the positions of service in their respective governments, or it will come about when the fallen ones have taken over the earth, as they have planned to do in meeting after meeting in London, Paris, New York, Washington, D.C., etc. And they have gathered behind closed doors and in secret chambers to plot the destiny of the children of God on earth. He's talking about the deep state, and he's talking about the situation we face in this very moment in our history. He said, it will come then when they have reached the peak of the carnal mind in anti-Christ, anti-Buddha, and the dragon that would cover the earth with darkness. And in that hour of the culmination of that consciousness of the fallen ones, the light from the great central sun will break their government, their darkness, their false hierarchy. And the hour of the breaking and the confounding of the fallen ones may not be disclosed. It may be decades or hundreds of years after the crucifixion of mankind by the one world economy and one world government. And therefore you see, it must be heard by the people of God on earth that the hour is at hand, and that the Lord Buddha has extended to you as people of God 1 decade for the turning of the tide, 1 decade from this hour for the spreading abroad of the teachings, for the contacting of hundreds of thousands of souls who will take the teachings and the science of the spoken word and use it for the salvation of earth. After the decade has passed from this hour, there's no guarantee forthcoming from the lords of karma or for the keeping of the scrolls that the tide can be any longer be turned from the fate of that has been plotted by the dark ones. And that's was given in 1978. And a decade from there would be one in 1988. And this is 2021. So we know we're on borrowed time, and it's very, very urgent that we start becoming serious about our own approach to what we have been given to hear. We see then that if the light bearers are not able to understand the mustering of forces and the summoning of the will, if the light bearers are not able to see in the cause the key to the salvation of earth, then there will come that period of darkness over the earth until all mankind cry out to the living God, and their calls will go forth as in past ages. And the Lord will come on his own season after he is satisfied that the people he have understood the measure of their own wrongdoing and their own neglect that has brought upon them the devastation of the nations. And as we look and see the stupid things that are happening, that just unbelievably stupid things that are happening from the fallen ones, we have to shake our head and say, God, forgive us. We must move forward with our work. Let the call go forth then, he said. Let the children of earth be warned, even as I warned the mother of the flame a decade ago and longer when I came to her at the nation's capital with the announcement of the darkness that was coming upon the earth. Much of that darkness is already here. And yet even in the people, even the people do not see the darkness. Here's the secret. He said, it is as though the light were being dimmed little by little by little by little. And they had accustomed themselves gradually by the descent of that light until it becomes just a single candle in a room. And yet they enjoy the darkness because their deeds are evil. He said, we have a ray of light in our hearts. The ray of light is the arcing of the energy from the Himalayas to the city of the angels, from the heart of the unascended masters to the heart of the mother and the devotees gathered here. The ray of light is that thousands upon thousands of souls upon earth will receive the teachings and use it if it is presented to them in the right word, in the right consciousness, with the right understanding. Therefore, you see, it is not enough to print the books. The books are not the means of the conversion from darkness to light. They are an instrument in the hand of one who is quickened by the Holy Spirit, who will walk with the Christ and the Buddha to speak the soul to souls throughout the earth. Be then as pilgrims Be brothers and sisters, going forth 2 by 2 on your mission to awaken the people of this nation and every nation. Understand that this means the conversion of your heart flame. If you have neglected your heart and neglected love, then you are lacking in the hour of the Lord's call. Then you must go aside for a time to develop that heart chakra until you have the instrument to convey our light. It is so important for us to understand. He said, it is not words, precious ones. People have heard the words spoken by the prophets and the great teachers, and they have turned away. It is the great central sun messengers and the Buddhas of the cosmos who come forth in this hour of my coming in celebration of the Buddhic light. Great central sun messengers and cosmic Buddhas are gathering for the movement of souls on earth. They come to make the contact with your heart. They come for the expression of your heart flame. They come to speak through you the word, peace, be still. And therefore I announce to you the dispensation of the Buddha and the day of the Buddha, the coming of hosts of the Lord who have not yet in this age, nor in 10,000 years, turned their attention to the evolutions of the earth. 10,000 years ago, these cosmic beings withdrew their energy from earth because of the people and their own neglect of the God flame. And therefore, this hour of their coming is signaled and heralded by legions of angels, and it is made possible because some among light bearers have willed to keep the flame, and the light of that candle glow has been seen, and the vibration has been known, and by that the keeping of the flame on the part of people who have not understood the reason for so many decrees and so many calls. Haven't you sometimes thought, how long do I have to decree this? They decree. The mother just keeps going and keeps going and keeps going. When you begin to understand this, you understand why. We decree to the Elohim Astrea by the light of those who have even walked in darkness and yet performed the service. These cosmic beings have come, and they have conveyed to me the sternness and the seriousness of their consciousness, for they guard a flame of immense power, wisdom, and love. He said it is a flame not to be trifled with or trampled upon. It is the energy for the creation and the destruction of worlds. It is an energy and a consciousness which you may apply to be the instrument of, which you may use as you go forth for the conveying, for the conversion of the multitudes. And therefore, the specific purpose of these beings is to quicken the mother, the flow, the quicken in the mother, the flow of the publishing and the teachings, and to quicken the devotees, the teaching of those teachings which are published, the studying of those teachings, and the learning of the word of the bread of life. And then it is for each devotee to break that bread, to you, to the bread of life, to break it into morsels, and that to break it into small enough morsels that fit the children of God, to assimilate piece by piece, mouthful by mouthful, and not anywhere at once. What he's saying is, don't give the whole basket full to a person who's hungry. Just give him what he can handle at that moment. For I've seen people, they're so anxious to share the teachings of the masters that they get in too deep and they lose the people. Instead, maybe it's only one word, maybe it's only a few words at the right time that opens that door. He said, and so you see, you become the instrument of the Christ self, the governor of the flow of energy. You become the one who, in the consciousness of the great divine director, must determine what can be released to the little children and what must be withheld until another day for assimilation. We have to become sensitive. I just had a thought. When you look at the educational systems of today, what they're trying to push in our small children are the most unbelievable forces of darkness, trying to get into messing their sexual up, messing their consciousness up, helping them to become a woman instead of a man, or a man instead of a woman, all this kind of stuff. This is not where it has to be. And you and I have to stand and start working with this. He said, you will find that your energy is capable of burning, as with the of sacred fire, the consciousness of those whom you meet. Even as the burning of the sacred fire within the messenger creates effect upon many who come too near. Have you not heard people who were scared to death to meet the messenger, who stayed clear away from her because they felt this, what he's talking about here? She had so much power, and that power, that energy, was too much for them. So it takes you and I, with not that much energy, that much power, to begin to open that door so that they can handle when mother is nigh. He said, but the flow must continue. The march must go on. The pilgrims must go forth from the holy city, and the continual flow of this light must not be stayed until you draw your last breath on life of earth, and the Maha Chohan returns to me and to God, the God flame, the energy of the threefold flame restored in the four lower bodies. And so we need to understand the mission. We need to understand every moment of every day is there for us to put the right word. You notice I said the right word, not the whole gamut, but just the word that they can handle. This is the important thing. He said, I span the centuries, O beloved ones. I span your lives and your incarnations. When you heard the word of God through Noah, don't just throw this off. He's talking to you. When you heard the word of God through Noah, through Maitreya, through Elijah, through the prophets, through Jesus, when you stood in the circle around Zarathustra, when you were there when God spoke to the angel Gabriel, to Muhammad, when you were there and heard the teachings of the Buddha, when you heard the flow of the mother on Mu, were you there? Yes, you were. You were there. If not an incarnation, You were gathered as the souls of the righteous, even gather in this hour in all octaves of consciousness. And therefore, you see, you are witnesses unto the avatars of the ages. Only lift your consciousness and tune into my own being and feel yourself transported now, and let your fingers move over the records of these past incarnations. That's a hard thought. Imagine you were there for all those teachers, and still we're still here. What does that say? He said, you see then that ignorance of the law is no excuse for your failures, for you have known the law from the beginning, and you have been a witness unto that law. Just a little bit removed from the density of your waking consciousness is your soul's memory of all of the teachers who have gone before. This is why the law must act in the severity of the discipline in this mystery school. For you see that discipline must call a halt to all the less than the fulfillment of the divine plan, because you have known the law for ages and ages, and because the urgency of the hour is so great. When you think of the hundreds and thousands of years of preparing for the mission, and a decade that remains as a realistic opportunity to turn the tide, is it any wonder that the impatience of the law itself will manifest as the descent of karma for all that has gone before? When you trifle with the sacred fire, you must pay the consequences, for the law of your own God flame will not hold you guiltless. And so you see, beloved souls, Ancient of Days may well be your own appellation or your own name. You yourself name Ancient of Days, for you were with the Ancient of Days and understand the quest and the question of life on earth thousands upon thousands of years ago. That's hard teaching. That is a hard teaching. We have been around, we have heard them all, and we turned our back, and that's why we're still here. I sit as the Lord of the world in your midst. Can I concern myself with any other but the flame of God government, when it is this flame of God government that is being compromised one by one, individual by individual, until it is amalgamated in the economies and the governments of the nations, until mankind have no hope of escape except before the living God and the great flaming flame. When mankind reach this extremity and their realization that they are helpless before the powers of this world, then comes the moment of absolute reliance upon God. Then that reliance produces the opening of the heart, and then the heart chakras step through the veil and the Christ self, the veil, the Christ self, the I am presence, the great host of the Lord. And as they step through the veil, the energies of the great central sun descend to turn back the tide of the fallen ones. This, my children, is the sequence of the deliverance of earth. It is when the people know that there is nothing left they can do except to turn to God. And as long as they are satisfied and confident that their own solutions to mankind's problems will be the answer, they have not the light of God to truly save this earth for the ascension. We are there at this very moment. We must understand what he's saying. He said, let all who hear my word then, in all planes of consciousness, know that the cosmic Christ and the Buddhas have come forth to empower the people of God with the gift of the speaking in the tongues of the Spirit, the speaking in the language of the teachings of the law, and the interpretation of that law. Every type of consciousness, to every type of consciousness upon earth. Watch and see watch and see how your alignment with God will enable you to also be aligned with these cosmic beings. Watch and see how you will give voice to your understanding that has become the understanding of God in the law. Watch and see how souls respond and say, how did you know I needed to hear that truth? Why? You have given me just what I needed to see the light. Have you not seen this? Just a word or an attitude or a feeling bring people into a whole new consciousness. Did it ever occur to you that on your own you could talk for a week and still not touch the chord and in a soul needing the light? Having the devotion, yet lacking the wisdom of the law to see through the darkness of the age. It is not necessary to go through the mental body in order to bring forth the mind of God. And this is so important. We get so tied up with our mental gymnastics. Got to have this, you got to be this, so on. No, just one word sometimes is all it takes. It is not necessary to be bound by the ways of the mental matrices. It is necessary to be spontaneous in the spirit, in the flow of sacred fire for the conveyance of the word that is needed. Note that I did not say for the conveyance of the word, but I said for the conveyance of the word that is needed. Is this not the great requirement of the hour? The word that is needed to pierce understanding and ignorance and shatter the hatred and the viciousness of the fallen ones, and to enable a soul to stand in the presence of the living God. Haven't you experienced being with people and suddenly you hear yourself saying just a word or two or three and everybody stops? They caught something because somebody said something to you. It doesn't take a big mind. It just takes the spontaneous trust of saying something that you're led to say. He said, note that I did not say the conveyance of the word, but that it is the word that is needed at that moment. And this is why it's so important to see, hey, this is no big deal. Just be attuned and walk through the crowds and feel what the master is saying and say it when it's supposed to be said. It's so simple, but we make it so difficult. Well, I can't go out and preach. I can't go out and teach. I don't know enough about. They're not asking for that. They're only asking for you to be attuned and spontaneous, and you will become a phenomenal teacher. He said, hail, community of light bearers. I am Gautama. I have seen this caravan move from the nation's capital to Colorado Springs. I have seen the caravan come from the Rocky Mountains to the shores of the Pacific. And now I place myself in the heart of the community, my flame, my heart raised, connecting with each one who can hold the harmony. That's the most important thing. Being in harmony, you can receive. But if you're all messed up and you're full of energies, negative energies, forget it. You can't hear the right thing. He said, I speak then to some of you who have come newly to the staff and some who have been here a number of years. There is a necessary pruning of your souls and your consciousness. Neglect not then the word of chastisement or the discipline, for you do not see yourselves as I see you and as the mother sees you. And we have an understanding of what is needed for your light and for your victory and for your service. I don't know how many people I have seen on staff who left because of discipline. When Moria says something, you better just stop and instead of being hurt. I tell you, I've had mother hang up on me because my energy was not right. And once that happened, I could have cried because my own stupidity. I was on staff, but I was not attuned. I was in self-pity. And you know who calls, right? When you would wish you would never have received that call. So when you see this, when you begin to work with this, you begin to understand discipline can be done by many people. Get away from self-pity. Get away from this stuff and become the divine master that you are. He said, do not separate yourself in consciousness then from the precious Sangha. The Sangha of the Buddha is the community. And in that community, the strength of the oneness of the flame is the strength for the individual overcoming. As we move together, we know this. When you're in a group, even when we do it separately, 7 a.m. in the morning, it's hard. But you really feel that energy going, it's moving, and suddenly it changes your whole day. It's good tuning. So he said, I am sending forth a love that has not, that you have not known. It is a love which I contacted in nirvana. People think of nirvana as the experience of the Buddha, as the enlightenment of wisdom. But what gave birth to that wisdom? It was, I tell you, the love that is the very core of the nirvanic plane. Love is the beginning of understanding, and only love can open the crown chakra. What folly that mankind pursue the opening of the chakras in the brittleness of the intellect. They must first contact the two-edged sword of love that is for the chastening and the confirming of the word in the soul. Far more important that you should receive the chastening of love than the pampering of your human emotions or the tolerance of your self-justification. Far more important that you have the clarity of the stream of our consciousness, to be stripped of all that is less than your real self and all that would hinder you from being the flow of the governor of the teaching. I warn you, blessed ones, that in your nation's capital at top levels, top levels of government, there are individuals who are the pawns of the fallen ones, who are who on the strings of those fallen ones as puppets They are moving more swiftly than you will ever know this nation into the dark cycle of her history, the darkest cycle of her history. Their plans are catapulting the economy and the stability into one of the darkest, crises of all the history of these United States. I encourage you then to give calls on the economy and on the exposures of those who have blasphemed the word of God in the economy. This requires the calling forth of those who have created the multinational corporations, the Federal Reserve System, the systems of Social Security and income tax, whereby people are milked of the flow of life and that energy that is appropriated to be used against them in the downfall of their souls. You think that the Lord of the world is not aware of the most specific terms of all the strategies and the plans and the policies of the nation on earth. I tell you, it is the office of the Lord of the world to know every facet in detail, everything affecting the government on earth and the governing of the flow of energy. Can you not imagine the cosmic mind of God being present in the Lord of the world, providing instantaneous contact with these levels of detail that are recorded in every nation? Perhaps you have pigeonholed the Buddha, as they say, and you have thought that the Buddha comes only to talk of peace. I shall finish. Watch then, for where you see the darkness and the air, that I would come, and there I can only come if you name the condition and use the power of the Christ through prayer and fasting for the exorcism of fallen ones who have invaded the very body of mother and her children upon earth. Now let this occasion be the celebration of opportunity, for after all, a decade is more than a year and more than a day. And after all, what guarantees did you have before I came that you would have a decade for the victory? Thus, this enables you to pace your heart and life, your course, your deliberation. It enables you to gird yourself for the victory. He says, I am come in the flame of peace. All who are at peace with the inner flow of self on earth, this might receive my peace. All others will find that the angel of peace will bypass them, and they will not know that the Lord of the world has spoken, that the cosmic Christ and the Buddha have come forth, and that the children of the light will go free because the word is empowered in them this day. This has been a long dictation. It has been hard because it demands an answer from us. What is your answer? Peter, son of John, do you love me? Peter, son of John, feed my lambs, feed my sheep. Peter, son of John, you must follow me. Ask yourself, do you love? Are you love? Are you a manifestation every moment of your day? This is the mission as we survey the work that must be done. May God bless each one of us in its fulfillment. We ask it in his holy name. Amen.